Okay, welcome to The Impact of Trauma by Kay-lyn Jowers. Welcome. So, in the beginning earlier, I had the volunteers put their belongings in a trash bag. So, you can do that now if you would like. Give you a couple minutes to do that. And leave the bag on the floor next to your feet. So, explaining circumstances of misplacement. Children being misplaced often do not have the time to gather their belongings when being removed from their home. Therefore, what is in their possession gets placed in a trash bag the majority of the time if a suitcase is not allocated to them. I want to know how you're feeling with your belongings in the trash bag as we speak. Earlier, a lot of our volunteers said they're humiliated, confused, and angry that their stuff was just in this trash bag, and kind of embarrassed as well. Imagine your belongings not being a purse, phone, or car keys for a second. Imagine the items are a teddy bear you received at a court hearing you last saw your biological parent at, or if you had no time at all to get your belongings. These events can negatively affect a child's social and emotional well-being. Defining the well-being of a child. Children's behavioral, emotional, and social functioning are skills and characteristics that enable children to understand and navigate the world in healthy, positive ways. Children in foster care, their well-being is at risk currently. Social and emotional well-being of the children in foster care are at risk by the conditions that lead to the removal from their home and their experiences once in care. More than 80% of youth in foster care require mental health services due to developmental, behavioral, or emotional challenges. Defining trauma. It is estimated that 90% of children in foster care are exposed to trauma. Trauma can be defined as exposure to family violence, the initial removal of the child from their home and families, and by adverse experiences in foster care after their removal. Adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, which I know that in your volunteer training, you went over a little bit of this, are traumatic events that occur in childhood ranging birth to 17 years old. Examples of ACEs are experiencing violence or abuse, witnessing violence in the home or community, having a family member attempt or die by suicide in the home. Other aspects of adverse childhood experiences are the child's environment that can disrupt their sense of safety, stability, and bonding with growing up in a home with the following: substance abuse, mental health disorders, and instability due to parental separation. So this is a ACE calculator handout. So it's a questionnaire ranging from 1 to 10 that has questions that you would answer, where if it's a yes, you'd put a 1, and if it's a no, you wouldn't put anything. So I'm going to go over these questions. Did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? If yes, enter 1. Did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? If yes, enter a 1. Did an adult person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you, or have you touch their body in a sexual way? If yes, enter 1. Did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? If yes, enter 1. Did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you, or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if you needed it? If yes, enter 1. Were your parents ever separated or divorced? If yes, enter 1. Was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? If yes, enter 1. Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic, or who used street drugs? If yes, enter 1. Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? If yes, enter 1. And lastly, did a household member go to prison? If yes, enter 1. So after you go through all these questions and you answer them, you would add up all your guesses, and the scoring is defined as this. If you had no yeses, there's no evidence of risk. If you had only one, there's low evidence of risk. 2 is mild evidence of risk. 3 is a medium level evidence of risk. And if you had 4 or higher, you would have a high evidence of risk. So you would be experiencing adverse childhood experience. Types of trauma defined. Acute trauma is often associated with a single event that happens in an individual's life. Acute trauma can range from witnessing a violent event or an experience that threatens an individual's physical or emotional safety. Chronic trauma is trauma that is repetitive and occurs over a continued period of time in one's life. Chronic trauma can include domestic violence and/or child abuse. Complex trauma describes a child's multiple exposures to prolonged traumatic events. There's multiple research indicating that negative long-term, especially if repeated exposure of traumatic stress, might be experienced by children who have been abused or neglected. Now we're going to go over a child and adolescent needs assessment, also known as CANS. It's also a trauma assessment that goes over complex trauma in a child's lifetime history. So CANS is known as a trauma-informed assessment and treatment planning tool to guide the selection and use of treatments in relation to complex trauma. This is the only domain that can reflect a lifetime history of any traumatic experience a child has experienced in his or her life. There's 3 components of this assessment. The first one is trauma-informed assessment. The second is trauma-focused treatment planning. The third one and the final one is trauma-informed or trauma-focused treatment being used. So the third one would be an implement treatment being placed after going through 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 is kind of like research. So it's kind of like a 3-tier process to go through. This specific trauma assessment places an emphasis on the assessment of protective factors or strengths of the child as part of the overall assessment. So it focuses on the strengths that the child has developed over time and doesn't focus in on the deficits of the child or the negative experiences. This is an example of a domain. This is the strengths domain. So you see it's 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0 is the centerpiece. 1 is useful, 2 is identified, 3 is not yet identified. So it ranges from family strengths, interpersonal skills, optimism, educational setting, vocational skills, talents and interests, spiritual and religious, cultural identity, community life, natural support, relationship permanence, well-being, resilience, and resourcefulness. The child's strength scores action levels defined. So it ranges from 0 to 3, as I described, or you saw. 0 is a well-developed or key point strength. This area may be able to be used as a protective factor and a focal point for a strength-based plan. 1 is an area where a useful strength is evident but requires some effort to maximize this particular strength. This strength may be built upon and used in treatment. 2 is an area where strengths have been identified but require significant strength building efforts. 3 is an area where there is no current strength identified and there's no evidence of a strength in this area that they can build upon. Family and interpersonal strengths. Family would be family members defined by the child or biological relatives and significant others with whom the child is still in contact with. Consideration of the family is a support and strength to the child. If a family member has a negative reaction with the child, they will not be considered in treatment. Interpersonal refers to the interpersonal skills of the child with peers and adults. This really focuses on how healthy the child socializes with his or her peers and adults around them. Coping and savoring domain, which is I really like that it highlights this, is a domain that is based on the child's psychological strength that he or she might have developed, including both the ability to enjoy positive life experiences and the ability to manage the negative life experiences, which is scored independently from the child's current level of distress. So basically, it really shows how the child has develop their own coping and savoring mechanisms in dealing with even when they have positive life experiences and even whenever stressors come in their life and how they cope with that. This is just some commonly diagnosed disorders that I have recently heard over me just observing court hearings and family team meetings and stuff like that over my time at CASA. So the first one is oppositional defiant disorder, also known as ODD, which is a childhood disorder that is defined by a pattern of hostile, disobedient, and defiant behaviors directed at adults or other authority figures. We would most likely see this in older youth in foster care because they always have somebody telling them what to do, and that really just can build upon having that hostile behavior against authority figures. The next one is reactive attachment disorder, also known as RAD, which is a condition in which an infant or young child does not form a secure, healthy emotional bond with his or her primary caretakers or parental figures. This can be seen within a 3 to 4 year old being bounced around from foster home to foster home in a short time span. And the foster homes describing the child as a challenged child, and they're showing outspurts and outbreaks when really and truly the root of the problem could just be trauma. The last one is ADD and ADHD, which is a chronic condition including attention difficulty, hyperactivity, and impulsiveness. I'm going to tell you how trauma and ADHD overlap. Some studies suggest that children diagnosed with ADHD are at greater risk of experiencing trauma. The symptoms that overlap include difficulty concentrating and learning in school, easily distracted, often does not seem to listen, disorganization, hyperactivity, restlessness, and difficulty sleeping. So all of these symptoms, they overlap and they show the same signs of ADHD and trauma. So really and truly, the root of the problem could be trauma a child is experiencing. I'm going to send you home with some take-home tips. The first one is remove the child from any triggering environments that may cause them stress. If you see the child is wiggling their fingers or just having outbreaks, just change the scenery. Just leave the room or put them in a different environment for a minute and let them cool off. Be aware that your own ability to control your emotions serves as a model for the child. Try to understand the behavior the child is expressing before responding. Don't just assume. Try to understand. Strive to always have empathy with the child and understand the situations that they're going through right now. Be consistent, predictable, and repetitive. Thank you.